I mean, there's so much that I want to discuss with you, and maybe this might span a few podcast episodes, who knows? Because I want to hear about your background and how you got into the world of crowds. I also want to talk with you about some of the things we've spoken about, risk and what is risk and how it relates in this world of crowds. Um, and so maybe the two could, fold into each other. So I think it's always good to start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Um, and I want to hear the story anyway because I know a little bit about your background, but not
Hmm.
everything. So, Marcel, how did you get into crowd safety?
It's it's a good question. Like the origin question is always like hard to think back and like puzzle it all together. But it definitely started during a time when I was in the military, which I was in the military for 12 years, for the reason that I wanted to give something back and keep people safe. When I was 12, and you stop me if I'm going too far. So I'm going to when I was
No, I
12.
love this.
I was walking home from school, and in my area there was a big flooding, so much that we had to be evacuated and everything.
Mm.
And while I was walking home from school, probably last day of school, after then they closed the school because of the flooding, there was a helicopter, one of those big ones, um, with like loads of people on there, like massive helicopter, and was flying so low over me on my way back home. And I was 12, looking at the helicopter so close that I was able to see the eyes and the face expression of the people in it and looking out of it.
Wow.
And that gave those people that were helping with the flood, in this case, soldiers, young soldiers, gave them a face, and it
Yeah.
gave them, they were relatable. And I realized they have no business being here other than keeping us safe. And
Mm.
afterwards, they probably go somewhere else to do the same. Um, yeah, they don't know anyone here. I don't know them, but things will be safer because they're here. That left an impression on me, and I wanted to do the same. I wanted to serve and do my part, not for life, but for as long as it makes sense. At the time, so now I'm jumping to 18, 19-year-old Marcel, and I keep that part short. You had to go to the military anyway for 9 months.
Mhm.
There are ways out, like nobody doesn't want to touch a gun, won't. But 9 months was expected anyway.
Mhm.
So I asked, what's the tiny bit longer that I can do? Because I saw this helicopter like 6, 7 years ago. Like, what is it I can do this bit more like they did? We said we can stay for 12 years, and then after 12 years, you can still decide if you want to stay longer. So I went for 12 years and went the officer route, which leads you to the highest rank that you can achieve as a captain. So I went through that, uh, took for me the most adventurous part of that, so that I would end up in this helicopter one day or command one
I
of
love
them.
that.
Yeah, so went for everything infantry, everything that makes you jump out of airplanes, be on the very front line, and went for that. So in that, I then went up from being a normal soldier that walks past trees to uh, group leader, platoon leader. Like platoon is like 60, 70 people. Then to being a unit commander, which is 225
Wow.
people, 26 tanks, and everybody's armed to the teeth.
Wow.
So that was I was leading this at the end of my military career. Did loads of stuff. We can or cannot not go into this too much, but did all the adventure stuff that I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And then a flood came basically, and that was 2007, 2013. So I was in the military already for that by 8 years, I don't know, 11, 10 years, something like that.
Mm.
And the flood came, and I was in charge of dealing with the basically the council of that territory that we got, which was 100 kilometer, like 70-ish miles long strip of a river. And I was dealing with the politicians, with the veterinarians, with the police, with the fire departments, and all of this in order to liaise with them and then be the direct advisor to our battalion commander, who was in charge of those 70-mile long strip. We had more than 1,000 soldiers there. At one point, we had all but one helicopters of the German military under our command
Wow.
at this very strip. And my role was to directly advise the decision making and the civilian side on the other side. And you have everything that you think you would have in this long strip. You have kindergartens, you have civilian houses, you have
Wow.
a pig farm. You don't want a pig farm to be flooded.
No.
You have electricity, all that kinds of stuff. So you work with those, and then you leave. And the same thing happened to me, and I had my round circle. What happened then at the same time, and I promise I keep that short. You tell me if I achieved that promise. The Berlin Marathon reached out to me because I was running for the same club that organizes the Berlin Marathon, the track and field club. And they at the same time, same year, 2012 and 13, said we need to up our game when it comes to protecting us against all the dangers that might be out there. That could be something like the Boston bombing. For those that
Mm.
don't know, if you Google it, you'll end up 2013 Boston Marathon bombing, two of those actually, right next to the course. Yeah, and the Mark Wahlberg movie. Like
Mm.
Google it, you find loads there, and the whole world, the whole event world, marathon world had to up their game. And was brought in with this pretty much the same role as I did at the flooding, working with civilian organizations in a group that they would normally not come together. They only come together for like a specific event, like the flooding, or like something like the Berlin Marathon. Otherwise, they don't work in this particular way together, like a
Mm.
veterinary and fire department, so on. They're doing their own thing, they know each other. But for a very focused working group on one particular project, potential crisis, they
Hmm.
don't come together that way. And here's now how I came in by being asked, can you lead this control room? You don't need to know more than anyone else in that particular subject, but can you bring this room to the best of their results? Let's say they're all under stress, and maybe one is a civilian council worker and the other one is a civilian event organizer. And what if there's blood on the street? How
Mm.
do they still come to the best result
How did they
without
find
panicking?
you?
So when I was in the military, I had to study something. And I studied human science, which I thought that's a dead end because it's education, sociology, and psychology.
Hmm.
I thought my military is a dead end anyway, because I wanted to quit after 12 years. I
Hmm.
wanted to do my service for this helicopter thing that I saw, but I didn't want to have a family at the same time I'm in the military. So I thought, yeah, that's that end. Then I studied educational science or human science. And a part of that, I also studied sports science as a master at a different university during the military. And for them, I had to do an internship, which I did at the organizer of the Berlin Marathon. 4 week
Okay.
internship or something. Um, and I thought that's a dead end too, in a way. So I
Why did you
thought I
think that was a dead end?
I don't know. And I thought, what do I get? What do I become with with those studies?
Mm.
I sport teacher maybe. You don't want the
Hmm.
sport teacher that went to the military for 12 years. Nobody wants that sport teacher. Educational science, I didn't see myself there either. As I said, military would also end. And I
Hmm.
was a runner, so and I thought running also ends because I get older.
Mm.
But basically that established the contact with the event world. And they said, hey, we had an intern who was here because he needed an internship, but not a job, and he didn't want any salary, but he also leads troops. So maybe that's we can use that for something else. And that's my last sentence on this now. That's in the full circle. The reason why I was able to study crowd science like you did later,
Mm.
one of the entry requirements was that you can prove you can study a master. At that time, I had two masters already, just into dead ends, sports science and educational science. But that means I can find my way around the university. And that then led me to into the event world, led me to lead control rooms. We were battle tested with explosive devices and all kinds that you can imagine. And then I came to Manchester, just like you did, because living on old army tales um, won't carry you very long. If I stay there for 12 years, but I tell the stories and say that's why I'm here for
Mm,
another 12 years or 20 years, I think that gets old at some point and
mm.
definitely outdated. So when I heard about this MSc taught in Manchester, I went, yeah, like it went perfectly nicely with also it being the last year in my military career. And then flying
So
over and
you moved to Manchester.
um I during the last year of my military or last 14 months, I started studying it remotely.
Hmm.
And then the last half year in the military, the professor that we had back then, he took full advantage of me still being a military dude and listening to orders. And he said, well, I got a job for you over here,
Brilliant.
like relocate.
Wow.
And then I flew over. I was technically still for 4 months or 5 months, I was technically still in the military, but it took all my leave and I got like an exception
Yeah.
that they said, well, if you have a job offer after military, we should allow you to take that. Um, it's like that's what they want. They want you to find something afterwards.
Yeah.
But they told me on the last day, but don't get into trouble because technically you're still a soldier for the next
Yeah.
45. And 4 days later, we then the big article in the New York Times on the Trump
Oh, the crowd
administration.
counting.
Yeah, yeah. They said don't get into trouble. And 4 days later, we were called out by the press secretary of the most controversial, probably one of the most controversial presidents in US history.
Oh my God. For
That's what
anyone who
happens
doesn't
when
know,
you,
this was
that's
the crowd counting of the what was it? His inauguration.
his first inauguration
Yeah.
in 2017, 20th of January. A big article came out with basically my name in the first line, our professor's name in the second line. The New York Times pushing us forward because they didn't want to take the heat that much. So pushing our names as like experts forward. Um, and yeah, and then there was a big press conference based on that. They took this crowd number way too serious, but we were the experts basically that were brought in
Yeah.
by the New York Times.
Did you get any heat from his administration or him?
Well, I'm named in two books. There are there are two books that basically name this incident, and that it came from us and the New York Times. And there is an article on Breitbart News, which is like a right-wing
Mm, hmm.
publication that's supportive of Trump, who say the crowd science doesn't exist. And if it exists, then those people are all idiots or something. So I'm named in those, but that all passed. It all went on. It was just basically 4 days after I was technically still a soldier, and then it was
So
okay.
you started studying the masters and working at the same time
Yeah,
on it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I was in my second. I just started my second year in a master, second of 3 years, and got a position at the university to deliver crowd science advice, basically consultancy,
Yeah.
um, for the university for real life projects, which there was a big need for that because you cannot, anyone that has a problem in event world doesn't have 3 years to study it and find
Yeah.
a solution.
So how did you what because you had these I know you said about the entry condition for needing to study a master's, but what made you choose this one as the one you wanted? Like, was it something in the flood response, in your time at the military, at the Berlin Marathon, that you
Yeah.
saw these things connect of where your
So
interests lay?
yeah. So there were in this control room, Berlin Marathon, as I said, we were battle tested. Like we had a few of the hardest challenge we ever had in this race that we had to deal with, which may be something that's potentially explosive and something where
Hmm.
you level up, you escalate the whole ladder that the police and the forces in the city can escalate. We managed that from this control room on. And I then realized I need something more, as I said, than experience in the military. So I was thinking, what
Even
could
though
that
at the
be?
minute that's probably
It was
one of the
perfect.
best.
It was
Like your
perfect. Like,
experience
yeah.
in the military is probably, to people in the event industry, because there's still not a lot of training to be able to respond to a potential explosive threat.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Having your military experience actually one of the best. So I love the way you're coming from the military going, I feel like this isn't enough. Like that's saying something with you coming with your level experience compared to us civies.
Yeah, it felt very familiar. So we were in there, and there was an immediate risk to a few hundred people. Then there was a proximate risk to 3,500 people, and then there was uh, a very real risk to the entire event being cancelled and being technically under the attack of somebody who put a bomb there. So the question is like, which of those dangers can you mitigate, and can you rescue the day that nobody will ever really find out, except for I don't know, something that the press office then has to deal with. And that's what happened. We saved the event on that day. Nobody really knows about anything but the press release, and that's now 10 years back, so we can
Mm.
learn from it without making a big story out of it. So, but those things happen, and those things will always happen. On that day, it was perfect because can I tell you something? I don't tell a lot of people. But the thing is, in moments like this, I am super straight. I have no emotions. It's just normal. It shouldn't
Am I
be in a,
surprised?
I don't know. It shouldn't be at a peaceful event, but in the military, that's why you're there.
Mm.
Like otherwise you wouldn't be there. So there it felt perfect. It was great working with the bomb squad. It was great working with the police. For them, it was also great because they were like I was straight in what I told them, and I was 100% true to like when I tell them we have 32 minutes, otherwise we need to cancel the event. If you can do it in less than 32 minutes, great. If you need more than 32 minutes, let me know whenever you can, and we then have to find other ways,
Yeah.
including canceling the event.
Yeah.
But I won't call you before 32 minutes. You have your own stopwatch.
Yeah.
Um, so and that made it something like this or things like this made it really easy for everybody to work because the bomb guys, I said, well, normally people like call every few minutes or look over our shoulder or ask us, what do you think? My leading style, at least there, didn't need us to do that because we told them it's 32 minutes. If you take way longer and you know already, then take your time. If you can do it in a bit less, that would save the day. But
Mm.
it's I don't know. You know better about what your task is. I'm
Mm.
just telling you where is a trigger point that leads to one or the other decision. They called us after 27 and said, "We're good. You can take option A."
Wow.
But they would not have known. Do we need to hurry up? And they said
Yeah.
they had a pretty chill 32 minutes. They had a good feeling they can do it in less, but they didn't need to rush.
Why
And we
32 minutes is what
Oh, it
made you come
was
to that decision?
yeah, there was a crowd thingy. Sorry, because you and I talked. That's the way we talk. We had an event going on, and we had more and more people coming in, and we were able to predict how fast will people come in.
Mm.
When do we have a critical mass on site that we
Yeah.
need to open another gate
Yeah.
to release that pressure? And if we open that gate, everybody will know. We also don't have a secure perimeter anymore, so the event is technically over.
Yeah.
And it's also very public.
Yeah.
So for those 32 minutes, we can hold people, we can rearrange things, we can yeah, repurpose different areas that we could use for something like this. But after 32 minutes, this will change. So they did loads of things. That means I don't need to constantly check. I ran this calculation. I now just need to, like he still taught us, that's how you do it. You run your calculation, and from then on, you only tick boxes and see if
Mm.
you're still on the projected target. But you
Mm.
stop the work. You basically just look for warning signs. So yeah, that's in a nutshell is what happened. But while this is going on in the control room, you need to work with those that you need to work with, like in this case, the police. You need to literally give crayons to those people that like freak out because few of the words that I just mentioned might upset people. So that's sounds odd, but that's also what happened. There was a guy who literally couldn't handle it and was
Yeah.
staring up the entire room, potentially losing the the
The
might that
bat.
such a room would have.
Mm.
So I gave him a map and a few crayons and said, we need a radius from this position.
Yeah.
Make a
You gave him a
100,
task.
200, 300 meter radius. And if we need to ask you a question along the way, because you're still a valuable member of this control room, you're here for a reason, then answer those questions. But unless somebody has a question, like draw. Um, yeah, things like this. But
What else do you, yeah, go on.
the one more thing you also have to do then, obviously 32 minutes, that's a very analytical thing.
Mm.
You calculate 32 minutes. But different things also, it's crowd science is different than mathematics because we do have humans.
Yeah.
Humans like CEOs who out of a sudden are sponsors who out of a sudden show up in the control room and say, don't we have a bit more time? And you literally need to say, no, like
Get out.
we can bring this to court afterwards, but I tell you, like even if I
Yeah.
want to, it's only 32.
Yeah.
And then you also have staff who need to deal with everything outside of those people that you reroute, of those people that you bring to areas where, wait a minute, I read the information booklet. We should be somewhere else right now.
Mm.
So somebody needs to manage all this. And those were the only ones where I said, if you think you cannot hold them there anymore, like if you need music, if you need water, if you need anything, let us know. But if you for some reason think we cannot hold people here anymore, um, we would have the space, but the mood here shifts.
Mm.
Then we can call it straight away. There was the so I give you everything you need while the control room. I tell you 32 minutes won't cause trouble per se, but if you think you can't do it anymore because you need to make this all happen, then I call it and I won't ask. I won't tell you afterwards analysis showed us you should have been able to or whatever.
Mm.
Like, make the call and you have my full trust and I will back your decision, come what may afterwards. So yeah, that's how we did it.
And
Um,
were you running the control room at that event, or were you advising whoever the sort of event management structure of whoever was event controller or safety officer, or whatever the
yeah.
role was?
So normally I'm advising. This was one of the earliest before I was like, before I had such a big crowd aspect to my name. But at that point, straight or still in the military, I was advising the control room. But in such a case, when that happens, I was running it.
Yeah.
So that's also like a military lesson. If the scenario is always, let's say, a helicopter goes down with all different ranks in there, and everybody survives, but they now need to fight their way back through the forest, back to their own troops. The person who's leading it is the person most capable leading it in that moment.
Mm.
All the ranks doesn't matter, like they're all just in the middle of nowhere, need to make their way back. Whoever is capable in that moment to lead the group will lead the group. So that was me, and that's what I wanted to say earlier. In moments like this, I'm I don't flinch. I don't mind. Anyone that we can rescue, I want to rescue. Those that we can't rescue anymore, somebody else needs to deal with it. We need to move on and focus on what we have, what we what we need to protect. Um, so no emotion. But when I watch a highlight video, I think I just sent you one a week ago from New York City Marathon. Watching a highlight video of somebody just says something after they finished, or somebody proposing to his girlfriend or boyfriend at the finish line. That gets tears to my eyes. It's
Mm.
insane. In that moment, for the entire 20-hour shift on the day, no emotion, no nothing. Fun, yeah, I'm still cracking jokes, but I'm very focused.
Mm.
Um, and if there would be something potentially harming with blood involved, it's that's what we're there for. But when I see such a video, I see emotions that I see things on a video that I cannot show in the same way. But in those moments, it's like it doesn't get old. I'm still watching the same highlight video from 2016, New York City Marathon, with my students every year.
Yeah.
I react the same every single time. I hope they don't call me weak because I
I
don't know, there's maybe a little tear coming out.
I
But
I see that as a sign of strength and resilience, because you've got that connection because you've worked so hard to keep those people safe, and so that they can, experience the joy and success of crossing that finish line, or proposing to their loved one, or overcoming their own battles, to be able to experience like all those range of emotions. So, and you were there, behind the scenes, making sure that was facilitated and keeping them safe. So, of course, it's we're human beings trying to keep human beings safe. I mean, I think that's, one of the most noble things that any human can do, right? So,
That
yeah.
answers the question that you asked me a long time ago in this podcast. If they don't even know that we're there, and in this marathon example, they're exhausting themselves over 26.2 miles. They're in shorts, they are like in sweat and tears, and they're super exhausted with no protection other than basically their as little as you can wear on a hot day of a marathon. And they don't even know that we're here. They're as the most vulnerable they ever be. They're not
Mm,
quick anymore on their head nor on their feet. And they don't even know the worries that we need to keep away from them. They won't even know.
mm.
So yeah, that's as close to this like helicopter moment when I was 12, and I can't stop.
I love that that came full circle for you, that you ended up at the sort of high point of your career where you had all of the training, all of the skills, all the experience to be able to go in and conduct and take on that coordination role of a flood. Like
Mm,
I just, talk about like the universe sort of guiding you to what you were always going to do. And
yeah.
what was it that like, well, my first question with the flood was what actions did you take and how did you approach how did you approach this coordination role? Because, as you already mentioned a few times, which is, I think, what everyone needs to realize when it comes to responding to an emergency is you're bringing organizations and people together who are not normally coming together. So, the way I describe it, it's the same as an event control room, which I want to
Yeah.
ask you some questions in a bit. But I always say it's like asking a football team to come together and win the World Cup or the Super Bowl, but they haven't done any training together.
Yeah.
Like you've got this huge demand. So how did you approach it and what actions did you take together to respond?
Yeah. So I'm sitting in quite some control rooms every year, may that be in a stadium or citywide event or festival and whatnot. And it's for me, I always want to learn as much as I can about those individual roles of like what is their focus at the moment, what tools do they have at their disposal, like what information can we get out of them, and basically understanding their perspective, kind of expecting or knowing that each of those groups sees their perspective as like as a very dominant or very important one.
Hmm.
But at some point, someone needs to make the decision what is now more important than the next thing. But understanding when I need whom, what information I can get from them, but also who's sitting with me in the room. Like the crayon thing that I mentioned earlier. So there may be one person who's the absolute gateway to crucial information for me, but not the most equipped for a certain scenario. I don't know.
Mm.
When it gets too late or too hectic or too dangerous, might not be the right person. So, but that's the team we have. That's another military one, and I sorry for like making this so military,
No, this is
but when
really useful.
I was 20 and I got my first group to lead in the military and I had them for 3 months and I had to bring them to their training. Get them from literally their first day in the military to 3 months later when they finished their basic training. And they came the way they you expect them to come. Long hair, pretty much against this like mandatory service. I don't know, still having Xbox controller in their hand or whatever. Like first day. And but that's my group. You cannot line them all up and say, I wish I have those 12, you know? You get
Mm.
those 12 and you say, okay, that's it. I don't know. I would
Work
have,
with what you got.
yeah, maybe I would have asked for better people, or some of you, I don't know, probably yes, you look like you're sent by the enemy or whatever. But we're
Put
gonna
the
make this,
Xbox controller
yeah,
down.
yeah, we're gonna make this happen and we're gonna become a good team. And it's the same in the control room. You need to work with who you have, and you may also be surprised along the way of like how this comes together. So yeah, then I cannot give a recipe, but basically it's almost like a conductor in a. I don't want to compare it to conductor an orchestra, but basically that's what it's like. Who do you need when? What information do you share at what point in what group? And then how do you get to the best and most informed result? Yeah, and you won't have the luxury, unfortunately, that over years you can grow to perfect teams that just
Mm.
won't happen in most cases. So you need to work with what you have.
So you apply that to working with those partners when you responded to the flood.
A genuine
How did you
interest.
find out who I get so can you remember like the minute you found out and the minute you were assigned, like your first sort of like how you gathered that information or how you approached it, if it comes to your memory?
Yeah. So in the flood, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a sergeant with me. So I think I was lieutenant at the time. It was like the second rank of being an officer, and then I had a sergeant with me. And basically, I tried to find out. I remember how I basically briefed him in the car on the way there. We now go in military uniform, camouflage, go into this like civilian building, which is by the council and whatnot. So we're gonna pop out, just basically the military is here now or whatever. So, but I'm going to talk to them. I do the formal stuff. Talk to them. What is it that they have? What is it that they're worried about? What is it that we can help? Um, and I sent him to the coffee machine and to the cookies and said, "You do the same thing there. Just like talk to people, and talk about other stuff, but figure out who those guys are, how
Mm.
they work, what is it that they're really afraid of, because they live here.
Mm.
And the flood is coming to their homes as well as all the things that they professionally deal with. But yeah, let's get a good feeling of them so we can help them the way they are. It doesn't help if we come in and say the military is here now, if they're all shivering in their boots, or if they say we have things under control, then it also
Mm.
doesn't help if we come in with the wrong
Mm.
attitude. So I need to understand that. And also then realizing this guy at the coffee machine got almost better information than I got in all the formal things. Because when I came in, I got the briefings, I got like the presentations. Here are the things, bum 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 bum, this other. But he, yeah, he found out who can deal well with whom, like
Mm.
the vet and the local forest ranger. They're not very good friends or whatever, you know. It's like things like this.
And they have a
Um,
huge impact when it comes
yeah, yeah.
to
Yeah,
response. Yeah.
yeah. So we had a potential pig farm or a pig farm that was potentially flooded, which means everything out of a sudden all the water becomes contaminated. So now
Yes.
there's not just a village that is underwater, it's a
It's
village that's under pig water. Then we had a bison herd on the loose. Those are the things that happen. You know, we had a herd of bisons, which are for bison meat or whatever.
and you have to find them.
We had to
Heard
find them. We had to find them and hurt them. So,
how did you herd them?
so we had, as I said, we had like a four-digit number of soldiers, and I asked for the 18 bravest. I said, "Hey, you're moving sandbags for days already. Like, do you want a break? I get you a helicopter to fly somewhere, and then we herd bisons." And I was told that they are not dangerous because they are like deer, they flee.
Okay.
That's what I heard. But
Okay.
still, you figured it out. That at least means that you do have a chance, and it's a worthwhile thing. But don't risk your life for the bison. But we also don't want those bison to run around and potentially run on streets or something. Like
Hmm.
if you hit a deer with a car, it's one thing. If you ran into a bison, that's a different story. So yeah, they came back with quite some stories, and they said, yeah, we tell you about bison because it was crazy. But it did work out, and those are some of the things that you have to deal with. And
So they found them all and they herded them somewhere away from the flood risk plain?
they got them they basically corralled them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like it took them a whole day, and it was crazy, and they feared for their.
That's what you were doing with all the helicopters.
No, we just flew them over and then like took a helicopter out and said do the rest from here. But it's those are also ones. Imagine you need to prepare a form for this. It's even an event. It is also things like this. You talk to somebody. He said, "Hey, we have those bison." There's not really a form during a
Mm,
flood to deal with this, but
yeah,
we,
you
we
just
don't want it to run into on the street into cars.
yeah.
And then you just need to get stuff done. There's probably a funny story that comes out of it, and then you solve other things in parallel or whatnot.
Yeah.
But those things, that was not in the PowerPoint brief. That happened at the coffee machine. But it's just one of many things where you
And
need to understand.
and what about the pig farm, the contaminated, potential contaminated water from the pig farm? So you guys were called in before the flood hit, before it
Yeah,
flooded, right? It was
yeah,
it was coming. So you were able to actually put in preparations.
yeah. So the way this works is like most of the time, or like with this particular flood, we knew because it was from melting ice or melting snow
Mm,
in further south in Europe. So the level rose, and then what happens is you have an alert, and then we were basically triggered to go there 5, 6 days before the peak.
hmm
So you can then calculate on this river how high will the peak be, when will
hmm
it be there, and when is it through. So you come in with your troops and you prepare for that peak. You evacuate what you have to evacuate. You strengthen the riverbed where you can. You make preparations elsewhere, and you need to constantly prioritize. And this pig farm, the extent of what's happening there, and the potential risk with it, that only became apparent along the way.
hmm
Because again, not all of it is something that they wanted to share.
hmm
No, it's like it's like you ask what's the extent of what can happen. Well, you get like a soft version of like it's not that crazy, it's not that dirty or whatnot, until then somebody comes out, okay, this is what will actually happen. And pig farming is not as clean as we said in the beginning or we say in our brochures or whatnot.
So your boundary of risk changed.
Yeah, you need to, plus at the same time, um, it becomes more and more clear what the peak will be, because as I said, you can calculate it, but
Mm,
it's a constantly changing scenario. Let's say the riverbed, the dam breaks further down the river. That
mm,
means a lot of water is flooding into either a field or potentially a village, hopefully
yeah,
not a city and so on. So somebody there had to make already a decision. We don't want to flood anyone, but we cannot get rid of the water. So
yeah.
is it a city or is it a village? Um, or is it a field? And that then has knock-on effect for everything further down the river. So
Mm,
you're not, sounds odd, but you're not hoping that something happens down the river, which relieves the pressure on you because some of the water is now already distributed.
yeah,
But you need to listen out for that. You need to check what it is. Will you get the full load?
yeah.
Because everybody further down the river succeeded. And can you hold that pressure? So we then also had to run that judgment on potential villages. Some of them had pension homes, some of them had like electricity works. Then the pig farm was a big thing.
Mm,
Plus politics plays a role because further down from us was also a big city. And they said, well, flood there. It's like they didn't want to give an order, but at the same time, they would have been happy if they would have had some good news of we that they don't get the full strength of the flood.
mm,
So it's constantly changing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the question is like, how can you deal with that? And can you prepare with the time that you have and the material that you have? Can you prepare, let's say, the pig farm?
mm,
And for that, you need to work through the night. Now you need to think about how can you light the pig farm to work through the night, like small
mm,
things like this, like an event. Um, Funny enough, the stuff that we have to light are different than what civilians have. We don't have that many lights that we set up because military, we don't like lights that much. We like night vision.
sure. Just
So
all wear your goggles, no?
yeah, so that's no fun. That's no fun doing the work. It also doesn't work that well.
Mm,
Um, we can shoot rockets in the sky that light the sky, but that's a lot of ammunition because they light for, let's say, 90 seconds.
Yeah.
So you
I'm pretty
constantly
sure tower lights are probably more effective.
yeah, sorry. And as a shooter, it's like one of those, I don't know, they call them bazookas in
Yeah.
the civilian world. So after three or maximum five of those, you're done. Like the blast, the sound of that is like so much. So any soldier can only do three, maximum five
Yeah.
of those. And they last for 2 minutes, 90 seconds or something like this. So that's also not really an option. So things like this.
Mm.
Plus the the sandbag price of an empty sandbag skyrockets at flood times. Yeah, it's crazy. So you need to
Mm.
buy those from civilians, but we don't have them lying around. So
Yeah, I'm really well, first of all, learning that sandbags are actually not very efficient and there's a more efficient product that kind of
mm,
you throw out the water and then it sort of swells as it but that nobody has stocks of sandbags. Like it's not
yeah,
an emergency response role to be delivering sandbags, and I very naively was surprised.
yeah, no, they're 100%. They're like flood walls and all kinds of stuff. Mass, if you really need something that's idiot proof and mass applicable, or like it can literally be brought out there non-stop, it is still the sandbag. I don't know if like something else will come,
Mm.
but if you really need something that can be used by a lot of people and almost like in a dumb way, sorry for my fellow comrades, but that's what you need for
Simple
soldiers.
way.
That's what
Yeah.
you need for
Yeah.
soldiers, you know, that they
Lowest
don't
common denominator.
yeah, let's just get we have loads of soldiers and we can shovel sand. We might not be flood experts, but we can shovel loads of sand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's that. Plus, you need helicopters and all that kind of stuff. So that brings us back to the pig farm. Can you prepare it, or will you lose it? And that
Mm.
depends on so many things.
Mm.
So,
Wow. And it takes me to that question about what we have talked about before, um, which I think will lead us into the control room stuff, which is quantifying your risk
hmm,
and setting your boundaries of what is acceptable risk, um, and how that differs. And I guess it kind of ties into your military experience and how you were able to do so well in an event control room. But, how many of us are competent? No judgment, just how many of us are actually trained and tested and competent to be actually to be able to respond to a sudden incident in an event control room, and how does that quantifying of risk kind of feed into that when we're talking about the planning and then the delivery of it?
yeah. So that's a really interesting question that I have to navigate every single day because every single day I give people risk advice or capacity advice or operational advice how to set up a particular event. And when I give that recommendation, I also need to make sure that for the layperson or maybe the financial person that's looking at an operational person or CEO, that they read it in the same way and that they feel this risk,
Mm,
which is really hard when you quantify it. You can give it an orange color or green color or red color, but that only gets you that far.
mm,
So I often go to something that's like a recommended capacity to stay with that, or a recommended time schedule. One where I normally tell them that's one where you can be worry free in a way. You still need to observe, you still need to make your ticks in order to check is everything going to plan, but it's worry free. Um, you can it will unfold. There's enough resources that things can figure themselves out. And every person, everyone involved has enough resources to solve small inefficiencies, small errors, small changes to the plan. Then there is the other spectrum. So one is worry free. Then there's the other end of the chart, which is like it won't work. It just you cannot go there. It will not work. But in between is a big area.
mm,
And that's where everybody that has an event that they need to finance or need to, in a way, staff, That's what they want to max out. That's in between is like it fits, but not very free. So, and that's where they want to be. They don't want it to break, so they don't want to exceed and go to the completely red end where it has no chance. But also, they don't want to leave too much buffer space left and right that costs money. But they're basically financing this safety, which is a bit hard to grasp. You don't know how much buffer space do you need, which
Mm.
differs. It differs. Like a really good team, in a task that they know that they trained, they don't need that much buffer space. In an inaugural event, maybe with people who are enthusiastic or had a drink or it's dark or it's raining, that needs way more buffer space until the muscle memory is there by everyone, participant or spectator and stuff alike. But you want to figure that out. And in the spectrum, where most of those events that try to aim for the middle of what works, but it works with management, prescribed management or management implications, or however you want to call it, like management challenges. But it has a chance of working if things go reasonably to plan. Um, the question is then still, when will it tip? So forgive me the numbers now. Let's say you have an event space where you know 2,000 people won't fit in.
Mm.
If you go with 1,000, it's pretty much very free. Recommendation would be 1,500. That means you need to keep an eye on it. We need certain management things that we need to look at, but it has a chance of working if we break down the space, if we bring them in an orderly fashion, all those things. 2,000 definitely doesn't work. 1,000 maybe a bit of waste of money. 1,500 is what I recommend. But now I get the question, can I do 1,600, 700? I mean, 2,000 doesn't work. We know that now, but
Mm.
about 1.8. And that's really interesting to quantify because although I can give an answer to the question, I don't know if it's number 1,751 that is breaking the system or the
Mm.
one before, or maybe a nervous one that came 80 people earlier. Don't I do not know. And that's also one thing that one of the great lessons from Professor Dr. Keith Still. There's low risk, and on the other side of the spectrum is not high risk, is unpredictability. Like
Mm.
at some point it's unpredictable. And if we bring that way too old example of the Titanic, just because it doesn't have enough lifeboats doesn't mean it hits an iceberg, does it? Like
Hmm.
that's the thing. It's very unlikely or very unlucky that it hits like a giant iceberg. But what then happens is unpredictable in a way. If it would have had enough lifeboats and would be prepared for this, then the risk would be low. But with all those dangers along the way, and maybe there are more dangers to a boat than just icebergs, it becomes unpredictable what happens next. It then depends on the decision of the boats that could help the people in the water. It depends on how close they are to the shore. It depends on their first measures or whatnot. But it becomes unpredictable. I've been part of an event just this fall where I never seen that at that event. Fences were lifted by the crowd and basically crowd surfed on the crowd
Mm.
and were removed. That never happened in decades of history of that event. And that's the same thing that what I just mentioned. I don't know if we were 10 people too far in. Like there was an entrance that opened too much and brought too many people in. But we ended up with more people in that area than was planned.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if we were 10 people in or 50 people too much before somebody would lift that gate or would lift that fence. But it did happen. It's unpredictable. You cannot calculate and then the fence goes up. 10
Mm.
more people and then somebody lifts the fence. But you know you're in this area where you are somewhat unpredictable and the tolerance for error is less. Like I said,
Could you have had
with
same
the
number of people and they decided to lift the fence up?
um there I understand the reasoning why that happened. Like they needed that space and they didn't see the reason for that fence, so they lifted that fence.
Gotcha. Okay, so it was
Um
because there was more people. Yeah.
yeah.
Or
So
that was took the was the action behind
yeah,
the decision to do that. Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
few less people, a different distribution because in the entirety of the event there weren't more people than planned. It was just in
Mm,
this location there were more people than planned. If we would have gone in with a different capacity or a few things different, our tolerance would be easier. We would either say we redistribute people so that this consequence wouldn't happen, or the error of that gate that was opened that brought that many people in would have been easier to stomach, or the consequence of that gate of that fence lifted would have been not as severe with less people.
mm,
But that goes back to your question, how do you quantify risk? Very
mm.
hard. I can definitely point out safe. It's like the event that doesn't happen and it's sunny.
Exactly. Yes.
Um, and then the event where it doesn't work. Everything else in between is depends on so many things, including weather.
Yeah.
Um, or like maybe for the listeners, just to like keep in mind. Let's say you have 1,000 people standing somewhere and it fits perfectly safe. Like they're watching a concert and they feel very happy. All of a sudden the music stops and it starts raining. They all need more
Mm,
space. All of a sudden the same space that was just good a few minutes ago is not really enough because everybody just feels, I need more space. Why did the music stop? Why is it
mm,
raining? How long is this going on? I have an urge to find out and I have an urge to get out of the rain. Rain that they would be able to accept if there's cool music playing with it. That's how Woodstock worked.
yeah.
But if you change just a few factors, out of a sudden this whole thing swings. And you have this unpredictability. Does it make sense? Does it trigger you of like what Professor Kistel taught us about catastrophe theory?
Because of everything you're saying and this not inability to answer, but I guess ability to answer quantifying risk in the sense that you can look at people as similar to fluid dynamics, but
Mm,
then they think and behave and make decisions. And, you know, like some of, and it's just things that how would you have been able to put this on your risk assessment or on your briefing? Like,
mm,
someone's going to come into my event and take their mother's ashes and then hand them to the artist on stage. Like, I just kind of, I see. I see these keyboard warriors online, and when
yeah,
something goes wrong at an event and going, they should have known better. And I'm thinking, A, the people who have worked that event can see what you're saying,
yeah,
like say it to their faces,
yeah.
and B, would the same thing have happened to you? Would you really have been able to prevent that from happening? And I don't know if we're still staying on the same sort of trail or going off, but I'm just going to go with it because I really want to talk about it, which is which is so every year I do a day workshop with the students at the University of Plymouth and the events management degree. The second year students is a crowd management module, and I do a workshop with them. So we go over all of the things all the tools they've learned of risk assessment and crowd safety risk assessment and crowd management in the start of the year. And then we apply that to a real world example. So I change it up every year, but or sometimes come back. But this year I again used um, Travis Scott's Astro World. And it was really interesting because it was only days after the his performance at in Melbourne, where there was a lot of crowd disruption on ingress, and so it was really like helpful for the students to apply. And in fair, I'm noticing a trend of every year. I don't know if they're getting more intelligent, but they definitely feel like I don't think I was that good when I was in university because I'd give them an hour task, and like by the end they have a pretty hot presentation with really doing a great risk assessment of what went wrong and what were the potential causes of why this disaster happened and what they would recommend to prevent it in future. And they all mentioned comms, they all mentioned interoperability. Um, uh, and anyway, so you see people on LinkedIn sharing these videos of what happened in Melbourne and saying like they should have known better, this, that, and the other thing. And actually, having been on the receiving end of deviant behavior, and when we're taught, right, Marcel, we're taught, right, since Hillsborough, there was that perception shift. Thank you to the Liverpool supporters who boycotted the Sun and started challenging, going, no, it is not the crowd's fault. It is the event organizer's job to keep you safe. That was that to
Mm.
me. That was that real cusp catastrophe shift, right? It slowly tiny changes, and then there's the shift. And so realizing that it's not stop blaming the crowd, we're responsible. So I've had that in my head this like my whole career and my whole time of everything I've learned. And then the Wembley Euro 2020 final where they attacked us and I'm standing there going, it's my job to keep you safe, but you're
Mm.
attacking us. Hold on a second. Like trying to go back through my library of like what I've learned, going, this is not what I learned. And so, with something like this behavior, this is just to me, I mean, I guess maybe it's sort of like oh, why can't I think of the name of the song? If you can't have your dessert if you don't eat your meat. You can't have your pudding if you don't eat your meat. You don't have your pudding without. And so if you can't behave and not attack the very venue that's here to put on your event, well then actually don't have the event. Now obviously it's
Mm.
it's easy to say that because many venues need the money, whatever, and that often trumps it. But just seeing that behavior and how all these keyboard warriors were like, they should have done this and that and the other thing. And I'm going, to me, no matter what you did, these people were going to behave the way they behaved. And
Mm.
why am I making that kind of blanket decision? Of course, maybe we can get into the nitty-gritty, the psychology, and kind of try and try and kind of get to the grips of it. But generally, they are being provoked by the artist to behave
Yeah.
deviantly. So no matter what zigzag ingress fancy pants systems
Yeah.
that you're putting in place to try and mitigate that risk, but if your risk is the actual crowd,
Mm. Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going, but I don't know if you've got
No,
like any
100%.
thoughts to that.
100%. There's this one thing that I learned from somebody who was mitigator at the police for football clubs. You know him, Ben Kause. We talked about this at length, learned a lot from him. He was also a hostage negotiator. There's a great book. I don't know if you ever read it, of like Never Split the Difference.
I love that book.
Um, yeah,
Chris
yeah,
Voss, yeah.
who basically says it's your professional duty to win the negotiation. It's not like
Mm,
at home where you split the difference. And if again for the 10 hostages, they want a helicopter and $1 million, and you say, well, I can give you an Uber ride for five
mm,
five hostages and an Amazon voucher. So you need to win that. You cannot just say let's meet in the middle. And
mm,
it's the same here. So I wasn't part of those teams, of those examples that you just mentioned. I can look at that. I can, if somebody asks me for help, I can give them my view on it, and basically read in whatever they have to deal with, and then like give them my assessment and make it part of a bigger picture. Just my view alone won't become the bigger picture. It won't
mm,
become the one thing that's the conclusion at the end. I can just like offer myself to become part of a team that deals with it. But what I learned in dealing or in talking to Ben and with books like what we just mentioned, which is a great read, honestly, it's I highly recommend it. What is it that they want? And maybe part of this is part of the event already. Going a bit nuts
mm,
is something that they want as part of their game day, part of their event, and so on. So how can we give that to them? I know I'm not part of the show, but now I kind of became with my Ingress system or whatever I'm responsible for, or my crowd dynamics. I became part of the show and part of the what people expect from it.
mm,
So we do that in football. Not saying it's the one thing that always works, but you basically see how can you satisfy that need. Um, Letting them walk certain. I mean,
Because
there's one.
what I find interesting is that uh one of the promo videos for one of like whichever Astro World, he used footage of people breaking in the
Yeah.
promotion. So he's really pushing like inviting that that behavior. And from one aspect, like I totally understand, right? Just as you said, it's like let's take over, let's cause havoc. Like who doesn't want to
Mhm.
paint the town red? You know, who doesn't want
Yeah.
to go out and let loose and let all that energy out? So, you know, facilitating that because the only thing I can compare it with antagonistic behavior are football fans. But
Uh,
then, and I always kind of thought, well, the behavior of the footballers on the pitch will influence the behavior of the crowd, right? Because they're looking at them as their, but I've never, like, the footballers, yes, they can behave like children. I think they
mm.
can, you know, they can be a little bit snotty with the ref, but I've never seen, well, you know, I've personally have never seen a footballer sort of incite and invite, you know, I've never seen a footballer personally
Mm.
like what invite them onto the pitch. You know, I've never seen them. So the difference between that sort of antagonistic behavior and Travis Scott's crowd is that you're seeing that behavior is being obviously publicly invited.
Yeah.
And so I just find that really interesting because the only response that I know is like the work of Ben, the work of Project Enable with Clifford
Yeah.
Sutton, working with of that sort of you know, you're phasing your step up and step down. And so, you know, if you I can't remember what episode it was in. It was in Star Trek of where they were getting like hit by this invisible force and they kept bringing up their defenses and the force was getting like stronger that was attacking. And
Yeah.
then they decided drop drop the defense completely. And everyone was like, what are you doing? We're gonna like the next one's
Yeah.
gonna completely destroy the ship. And then they dropped their defense completely, and then the pulse just went over the ship and didn't, and
Yeah.
it just passed by. So
But
like, you know, yeah, go on.
that's something that another sort of friend of mine, he does that with pretty, it's his response to, or his first thought or everything. How can I let whatever hits me run into nothing? I don't know. I think that's how
Ooh.
you fight judo or something. Basically just use that force. But basically it's the same thing. I mean, Ben has, oh, we should invite him to to this talk, but
I know. Ben,
basically,
wherever you are. It's been a long time. We miss you.
so basically the same as there of like, what can I give the other side to like satisfy whatever they're seeking or their need, and not fight with something that I have limited supply of and I
Mm,
might not be able to win. And maybe my response to them incites more of that. So we do have an event, not saying that that's the solution that works for everything, but it works at this particular event. It's also a rolling ball, I can't say much more. But we basically spend 300K just for the English setup, where we just built everything so that we can bring a large crowd into a venue. And part of this is a crumble zone. I won't tell anyone which part it is, but when somebody looks at the monitor or looks over my shoulder, it says, "Hey, this there, they're destroying this part." I said, "That's fine. That is for them to like,
it's their
uh,
playpen.
yeah, to like to do that." And every few minutes we set it back up, and then they do that again. But I'm looking at those parts and those parts and those parts which are still intact, which are super stable as they are right now, and they're controlling everything from here. And if, as you say, and I think you have a good point there, if this became part of the show, part of that's their first activity, as a part of like all the things that they're doing today, afterwards they got a hot dog and then they listen to the act. Maybe it should come from different budget. Maybe that's already the operational budget and
Yes.
it's not the safety security budget.
Yeah.
That's not for me to figure out. But yeah, I know that they will go for it. They will try something. And why not give them something where they say, wow, look, we made it happen.
Mm,
Uh, and then they come chuffed and happy
mm.
forward. This is constant game of like, what do they want and how do I take them? If I'm too strict,
They're going to
no,
retaliate.
yeah, nobody will.
Standard. And
Nobody will
and
have fun.
with
Even if
this,
they succeed, they will hate me for it.
yeah. I mean, because this is all part of the shifting crowd behavior, which I have been doing a lot of research into and trying to write an article, but there's too many variables that it's blowing my mind and I can't really make it succinct. But I used it in a presentation in EBIT in Cologne on Zone X about one of the sort of strands of this changing crowd behavior is this anti-authority behavior of, we don't like, why should we trust you? We don't trust you anymore. Like trust in governments and institutions is at an all-time low. I mean, there's the Edelman Trust Barometer, and they report like the trust is at its all-time low in people in in authorities. And obviously like a big shifter of that was the behavior like in the UK anyway, it was the behavior of the UK government during the pandemic, going, you guys all stay at home and don't look at it, don't see anyone, and but we're going to go and party. And so young people are just going, well, we don't trust you anymore. Or actually not just young people, many people.
Mm.
So, seeing anyone in a yellow jacket, in a high vis vest as a position of authority and then behaving, pushing against it. I mean, I have a friend who was working on that event, and they said that, so many of the staff were verbally abused and had a really terrible, terrible experience. So and
Yeah.
nobody deserves to be put into that position. So it does make it for a tricky sort of response. But I absolutely, at no point do I think it's an easy thing to solve. It definitely takes a lot of time and energy, and investment to put in. And I think this is where the investment into the work that we do is serious. It's a really important thing. It's not just, oh, it's just ingress and we'll
Yeah.
deal with it then.
No, and that's also I think where we really need to be careful to like give outside comment and knowing something better. This understanding, this cultural understanding is super important. Like a good example this year were the Euros that we had in Germany. And I was advisor to all venues and I was involved in the citywide movements in Berlin, which had the biggest packet, like the most games. And we always got obviously cultural updates or like cultural advice on whoever is playing in the next round in Berlin. How do you pick them up? Like, what do they react to? How do they react to authority? What is it that they want? How do they react to the team that they're playing against and so on?
Mm,
And obviously, I have that for all events. If I go to another country, I always try to get briefed on who are we dealing with? Obviously, what's the event? What's the group that's going? What's the history of this? Like, where in the whole story are we? Does it have like a long tail that goes back 10, 50 years or something? So how does that fit into the bigger picture? And the more you hear about this, the more you understand how complex it is, and you can really only grasp a tiny bit.
mm,
Which means that, and that's why we're not mathematicians, but crowd scientists, that informs my setup for ingress, to stay with that example. So it isn't just physics, it isn't just what fits, it isn't just how hard does that fence need to be so people can't lift it anymore. It's basically who are we dealing with and what do we need to do um, for them. And that makes it so hard for somebody that thinks they can advise or they can know better after the fact from the outside.
mm,
There's so much to it. And there is a need for smart people in this industry. And so if you think you're in this position, like call somebody, like become part of the
mm.
change and whatnot, which maybe, but I don't think if you know better, it definitely doesn't fit into the comment section. It's way more than there is.
I love that. It just also makes me think, if you think about that whole Ingress thing, and if you throw a load of like police full in their riot gear and then, see what happens when the crowds start arriving and how they're going to respond, and it's just the context is everything. So, you could have them in those positions in that gear, and it makes people angry and sort of gears them up for a fight, gives them an excuse to start
Yeah.
fighting. Or, you see like it's like that flip side of it being then seen as a sense of like safety and support. We had like of course I'm going to mention Taylor Swift, but like it
Mhm.
was like the last big you go into. And you've got police and in their gear and there's guns and of course these are kind of scary things to people who don't like guns.
Mhm.
But actually the flip side is, oh, they're here to keep me safe. But that's because I'm, the perception is, well, I'm not here to start a fight against them. Whereas the perception if it was like a football fan is like, well, I might want to start a fight with them. So they're
Yeah,
in that gear. They're in that gear because we're the threat rather than they're in that gear because there's another threat and they're here to keep it
yeah,
safe. So the gear is the same gear, but it's all about the context and,
yeah.
the event and the behavior of the people. But
No,
yeah.
100%. Just want to give you two examples on the things that you just said. There was one football game once, where it was likely that something will go wrong because there was this one group that one team where the fans literally they had an open bill with the other team. And there was then my advice, I cannot say where it was, but there was my advice to change the sides. Give like you have two sides of the stadium, and technically it's a draw that decides who is playing and sitting on what side, so which
Hmm.
fans get which end of the stadium. Because of infrastructure, advise to change that around, given of what we're facing. Just so
Mm.
one side has the stronger side of infrastructure, and the other one doesn't. But other part of the advice would be to do that just short before the game, like with as little time as possible, that we can still operationally manage it. But that is like a nice surprise, and people are happy. Wait, we got this side of the stadium, the luck of the draw and whatnot. So they still arrive with this like happy mood, and it
Mm.
isn't just a win that they had 2 weeks ago.
Hmm.
And now they hey, remember we were still angry, just to simplify,
Clever.
So it's things like this to pick them up and I don't know, diffuse or disarm or whatever.
Mm.
But for that you need to understand so much more, and that brings us back to the point of like there's so much more that you need to have a finger on the pulse or a feeling
Mm.
for it, or need to know even what to look out for. The other thing, how will they react to certain signals? 100% what you said regarding the Taylor Swift audience or whatnot. In fall, I'm always sitting in pretty much the same for three control rooms that are very different. The one in Berlin for the marathon, and then let's say the one in Chicago for the marathon. But basically, within a span of a few weeks, four different control rooms in four different countries, and also completely different understanding to, let's say, guns, what you just said. So in New York and Chicago, it's exactly what you said. There is this gun in the room, and everybody just, yeah, that's normal. It's part of it. Same
Yeah.
in Germany, different guns, but yeah, it's normal. In the UK, not so much.
Mm.
That doesn't make any side better or worse, but you need to be able to like navigate this and work with all of this.
Mm.
Um, Same with like first aid training that we do for all the staff in the US. It's for shooting wounds, while here in the UK, the focus is more on different things. While over
Mm.
there, how to stop bleeding from somebody being shot is something that's like high on the list during the first aid course. Same with like the searches, like the magnetometer or whatnot. Um, that we the sensitivity over there for some of those events, obviously we look for guns. That's what we want to
Mm.
look for,
Mm.
which is not something that we would do here. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that when you like a New York City marathon, love that event just 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, something like that. When you come out of the subway, you probably see somebody with a helmet on, looks like a soldier, and has a long, like a rifle in front of him. In Berlin, you would probably go back in the subway, go home and put a pot on your head and go under the table and say, I don't know what happened, but I'm sure there's no marathon today.
Yeah.
While in New York, it fits the context. Everyone says,
Mm.
"Hurrah, America," and feels safe. And in all cases, this guy, where he's standing in the subway, is more a sign than an actual solution. Like it's more like a communication piece,
Mm.
than an actual solution to an attack.
Yeah.
Um, like he's in the communication piece definitely, and hopefully never, but just a small fraction is to actually fight the the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that needs to be said deliberately. That's one
Yeah.
small aspect of crowd science. I don't know if we're still following a story along here, but that's definitely one aspect of it.
It just makes me think of another public event where, yeah, the police would kind of deploy tactics which to the public is irrelevant, but it's actually a signal to gangs saying, we know you're here, don't come any further. Um, yeah, communication.
Definitely, definitely. That's often when
Yeah,
I just had this with my students here at uni when we were talking about searches before an event, and they said, well, those searches they aren't really sufficient or they aren't really 100%. That's not the point.
that's not the
That's
point.
one of the points,
Yeah.
but it's like all those measures and that they're there and that it's basically communicated that there will be searches. That's a big aspect of like um you cannot make an event 100% safe against
Mm,
anyone that wants it harm.
mm.
If then no, then there would be no events, but you don't want to be an easy target. So it's that part of the communication basically, which is not for you. You saying like, hey, I'm coming in, I mean no harm, I'm an 18-year-old student. And it's somebody else is like the recipient of that communication.
It goes back to that whole thing, isn't it? That it's not about being safe, it's about the perception of safety.
Yeah, and there's also some aspects of that that you don't see,
Yeah.
like certain things that are looking up, just slowing people down for a safety check and keeping an eye on it, and then see what you pick up in that scenario that is basically in slow motion, yeah, making people a bit aware of the safety, and then continue observing. So yeah,
When the events restarted after the lockdown, and then having to put in all the COVID checks and people being grumpy and they didn't want to have all these COVID checks and having to go through all these processes, as in the crowd. And then as the pilot program continued, the government pilot program, they're like, right, now we're gonna drop COVID tests at this one or only do 1 in 5. I can't remember what it was.
yeah.
And then we started getting complaints from the crowd. Why aren't you testing me? I don't feel safe coming to this event. Now everyone's going to have COVID. And we're like, oh my God, like you were never
Yeah.
happy. And this is that whole part of like why crowd science is, we're trying to make it its own study area because it just pulls together so many different areas. And even like with me trying to wanting to do a PhD, like I have to be boxed into like psychology and
Yeah.
mathematics. And I'm like, but I'm neither of these things. I'm like
Yeah.
this smorgasbord of trying to pull in the like physics and then the human behavioral and like even down to neuroscience, it's like feeling safe is a physiological thing. Like it's a
Yeah.
bodily function.
But that's where I see some people being maybe I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but it's researching either one of those niches or either one of those subsegments that it can be done, and it's maybe easier to separate them and go down one of those rabbit holes.
Mm,
But neither of them will fully explain what's happening out there. Combining all of those mathematics, physics, psychology, sociology, um, uh, stress response on basically a very primal level. All of those things combined a will somewhat describe what's happening. But weighing all of this and making this all part of a bigger picture, um, it's really tough, and that makes it really hard for some people to connect to either those that need the solution
mm,
for lack of a better word, to sell their expertise. And that makes it also so hard for some of this to stay applicable. So yeah, it's that this is like a demand of a university here to like split it up. I understand that as well because somehow it needs to fit into those boxes. But
mm,
that may take it away a bit from the applicability. It cannot be, it really depends on who's the audience. In my case, more and more and more, the audience is the event organizer at the moment. Yes, we do our research, we teach, but like for the event organizer, that for me is currently a worthwhile audience to connect with because they need to put it into place. It doesn't help if I know things better on academical level for a part of their problem. I need to be part of the team. I need to be brought in
mm,
to help with my niche, but that technically takes me further away from the research aspect where I could solve it by studying some data. But that's not necessarily what we need now. We need a
mm.
solution in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., for a problem that we have an hour to solve or half an hour. Uh, yeah,
And that's the, like, I think for me, with how the industry is evolving, I mean, crowd safety and the work that we do is applicable to outside of events, right? You know, any
Mm.
crowded places, airports, train stations, public spaces, town centers, and then emergency plans. You know, like I'm at the minute I'm writing a community emergency plan for a community. Like so
Yeah.
it's applicable to so many different areas, but not just events, but obviously like my background's events and um how I really think that to be an event organizer, you have to have the like at least sort of a base level of understanding of this because as an event organizer, it is literally your job to bring people together, to bring
Mhm.
people into a small area. So I really think it needs to be part of fundamental training and fundamental like aspects of, you know, just like they need to know how to do project management, they need to know how to do event management and
Mhm.
budgeting and et cetera, et cetera. And especially when it comes to then, because if the one organizing it, you're the one in the event control room being the safety officer, the event controller, because the person who is coordinating that on the day has to have had planned it. I've been brought into events where I'm in that sort of decision making, sort of lead, not decision making, but sort of a leading role in an event. And without, if you're not part of the planning, it's sort of pointless. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of being handed someone else's baby to raise almost. I don't know, it's
Mm.
a terrible analogy. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, like with your experience and what we said at the what you said at the very start about you were able to be in command and respond in that control room. Like how many event control rooms have you come into where you've gone, yeah, if the shit hits the fan, they'll be fine.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. Like it normally doesn't start with me going to the control room. Normally with me starts connecting to the people before in a way. It's like I really think when I see people who are really good in advising on whatever niche it is, maybe safety or whatnot, or even if they're just providing the fences, and play that part of the whole picture.
Mm,
You need to be a pleasure to work with in a way. And hopefully it's natural, but if you cannot connect, then it just won't work. You know that yourself. If you have people where it's like hard to connect with them, it will break under stress.
mm,
Maybe this is one colleague that you can deal with, but not in a stressful situation. That's when it shows. And for the team to work, that is necessary that you understand each other and take each other. People need to deal with my German accent, and I need to deal with whatever problems they have or whatever. Um, and that's the biggest part. It doesn't help to be right or to know this, but I work with people who don't like mathematics, and I'm sitting next to them advising them, but I need to like cannot name any numbers, or something like that. So this all needs to work, and we really need to get to know who we're dealing with, and how do they deal under stress, and what do they need when they are getting under stress.
do you think that there should be some sort of like training or standardization of how to operate and run an event control room?
Yeah, there is some good training out there, like some, especially like police, or fire department. They're really good in running those. What is still, this cannot throw you into like an immediate emergency, and it wouldn't still work. It might not be fully applicable. I just the one lesson that I have, but I don't know if that's a blueprint that you can use with every control room. I hope that you have at least a phase where you can calmly get to know each other. And maybe that means that you're starting early on the day and everybody kind of gets to know everybody unscripted, or maybe it's a multi-day event, or maybe it repeats the year after or something. But that is so crucial.
Mm,
You could still go by the book and everybody does their job if you're immediately being thrown in emergency, but that you're able to work as a team and know the others have my back and know, okay, this person reacts in this particular way, but it's gold what he says, and I can use that. That's necessary to understand. So even if it works, a control room can do their work, and on paper, everybody is exactly the right person. if they get to know each other and have the luxury of repeating in a similar team for another day or another year, the outcome will be so much better.
Mm.
And that's a very soft factor of it. But I've seen a lot of people who were really good, but maybe take that bit longer or are maybe a bit too or not like flexible enough to fit into every team,
Mm.
a bit too set in their ways or whatever, so that they, with all their knowledge, just are still the wrong person. So for going back military, but I had one great guy. It was a selection process for a very special um, military unit. There's one guy who was amazing. He was uh, he was super strong. He was good in leading a team. He was so optimistic, even in the middle of the night, 3 days no sleep and whatnot. Could withstand everything. But when there was a bit of stress in the wrong moment, he lashed out.
Mm.
And not in a bad way, but still not helpful in that moment. And he didn't make the selection. It was like on paper, everything was great, but this kind of soft skill, just didn't work, you know? So the military, even they then said, we just don't look for like the strongest, most muscly, like most badass person, which he all ticks those boxes. Unfortunately, under stress, he's a bit the right word for bitchy. Like it's not, you know what I mean? And that can
I
happen
think
to the
we've
best
all
people.
experienced that, either
Yeah.
done it ourselves or
And that just doesn't
witnessed
work.
it. Yeah.
And that just doesn't work. So that
Yeah.
means I need to be able, if the mistakes are made, or I need to be able to like go with those and say, well, we work on that foundation now.
Yeah.
I wish we would have a different starting point, but that's what we're working with now. Let's roll.
Yeah.
And then also that people have the trust of like what I mentioned earlier, where that I said to the people at the lowest of the chain who had to implement this one decision that we made, was what I said in the very beginning of like you're holding those crowds, and while we're solving something else, we cannot tell you what that is, which was this like potential explosive device.
Yeah.
We cannot tell you what we're solving, but we need you with 32 minutes. Technically, you should be fine, but you need to implement it. You have my full support. If you call it after 30 minutes or after 12 minutes, if you say you can't handle it, I will not ask twice. We will go with that decision and it will become reality.
Yeah.
And I will never come back and I will never say, you could have, you should have, or maybe win it more.
Mm.
So it's trust like that. I don't know if I answered your question or if I talked around the soft skills. I just expected everybody in the room of a control room is an expert. I expect that. But that alone doesn't make a team.
Mm.
So, you know,
I think it goes back to that analogy that I use of, you expecting them to win the Super Bowl or the World Cup, yet they've never trained together because,
yeah.
they
And
could be all absolutely excellent players, but you need to build up that team spirit and that trust because it's also I mean, it just goes right back to interoperability, right? Which is why JESIP, Joint Emergency Services Interoperability
yeah,
Protocol, was established because reviewing all these disasters, it was the number one thing was speed and accuracy of communication of information, and the only way you can improve that is by establishing those relationships
yeah,
beforehand. As you said, you can be on paper, everyone's fulfilling their role as per the bullet point job description, but how are they speaking to each other? Are they shouting at each other? Are they judging each other? Are they, kind of not being able to have that give and take because the whole thing will just collapse then, won't
yeah.
it?
That 100%. That's part of, I'm not saying I'm really good at that, and I'm not saying I'm like putting on a mask for it, but I know that part of my job is whatever control room I'm going in, which are loads every year, in all kinds of countries and cultures. It is part of my job to connect well,
Mm,
to be likable. You know, so it sounds odd. That's not part of the package that I'm offering or selling, but it is part of my job. Like I need to bring us back to this book of like never split the difference, where also the author also describes of like you need to create that bond. It's um part of your professional duty to do that. And there are no experts in particular things who basically figure out they are the experts, the others just don't get it.
mm,
And why don't you get it? I mean, this is really important. But I'm just one of those many, like the veterinarian that I mentioned in the other example. Everyone has their single niche, which they think this is what everybody should focus on now. but I need to understand where I fit in, how I can be of service, what can I prepare while something else is solved, and where can I jump in to like steer it in now the right direction, and all of this without any conflict. Have I been in conflict in control rooms? Yes. Did I give the other one a way out to connect? Of course, that's absolutely important. I'm not, if I get in a conflict, I'm not in conflict to win. I'm just in a conflict to basically just steer the thing straight again. But there's no winning. It needs to bring the team together.
Mm.
Um, Giving one crayons was a conflict? I don't know. It was on the verge of one. And maybe what I said is a bit controversial. What I did was a bit controversial. But it was in order to like get the team together. And there have been people afterwards in the control rooms like, hey, are you mad at me? It's like, no, man. Like, what's going on? I said, just because it's early. I said, no, this is
I
um
also think that's a cultural thing.
yeah,
Right?
nah, of course.
Europeans, I know, there's all the kind of sayings about the Germans being so strict and but like generally Europeans, my
Yeah.
some of my family are Dutch. They're so direct. And then actually there's that thing of, the British especially, and even the Irish, it's like nice to a fault, but I think it's more of like, that comes from please don't shoot me. And
Yeah.
so in Britain, it's like being direct can be rude, but then in
Yeah.
in Europe, going around the issue is
Oh yeah.
rude.
Yeah.
Respect me, say it to my
Yeah. Yeah.
face, don't, so even that, where you're being direct and then people are like, oh, are you, and also like emotions are high, right? We're under a lot of pressure. We're doing our best to keep people safe. We're all under pressure. We're in a small room. And because you don't have that contact with the outside apart from the cameras, it's very focused. You don't have that sort of like peripheral perception at times because you're so focused on like dealing with whatever incident is coming up. So, we're not robots. We are
Mhm.
humans. So having all these sort of things coming up makes total sense, right? The whole point
Yeah.
of like going back to the physiology, the whole point of us getting on with each other is so we keep each other safe, so we don't get like pushed out of the tribe and then mauled by the lion.
Yeah.
So we're always trying to like our brains are literally wired to A, scout for danger, and B, maintain social connection. So we're like
Yeah.
always trying to like get on with each other. So anyway, I'm going into off into a tangent, but
Yeah.
so like everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, that makes absolutely perfect sense. So.
Yeah, no, but definitely being able to like fit in there in that room, that's what makes the team work. And I mean you started with a sports analogy, so I just need to add one there. It's your fault. The thing is it I really believe, and you see that when you follow the Euros or whatever, the team that plays with one another and is a team is potentially more successful than another team that has all those big players, all those big names, but that doesn't make them a team per se. And you can look at any league, you can look anywhere in Europe at those football teams that have all the big names, but not really the current success that basically that you would expect
Hmm.
with the value of their squad or whatever. So it's the same there. I rather have like the second best or third best or fifth best expert in something if we can make that person fit better
Hmm.
into the team. And sometimes, if you are like too good in your field and you think a bit too much about how good you are in that field, it makes you less compatible. But I'm not. That's not a rule. But like I've seen that unfortunately in the past. So basically, um, like the stuff that I give people as an advice dips like 10-15% into what I actually know about what's going on. But I cannot give them a full 100%. That would
Hmm.
be too much.
Hmm.
It would not be the right thing. They need like the gist of it now. So I dip in 10% of what I actually know about it. And that person can trust. I ran the other 90% through my head, through my machines and whatnot. So that is a way how I can connect without becoming a nerd that doesn't shut up.
Yeah,
So basically, that's my contribution to it.
I
And then
love
we
that.
just move from there.
I love that. And my last question, Marcel, is what inspires you?
Well, that's basically what I said earlier. I go to those events. There's, I mean, I just came back from New York, and my wife thinks I'm going to New York, and it's all just um, meeting people, bars, great food, and whatnot. Like, yes, that's part of it, but it's mainly no sleep and a lot of stress and long shifts and basically just being back on the plane, which is taxing as well.
Mm.
And then coming home and being completely done, like we are after events. But that's like back to back to back, especially in the fall and in spring on those weekends. So the event itself doesn't give me the excitement in the moment. I'm fully focused. Yes, I'm eating my nibbles and go to VIP functions and whatnot, but if you eat just like tiny finger food for 3 days straight and you don't have a plate in front of you, after a while, that's no fun anymore. It's like you're literally just eating small things. But what then really inspires me, and that's what we mentioned earlier, seeing some of those highlight reels, see some of those highlight videos, because I can't be out there because I'm doing something else while the event is going on. And I'm in a completely different mindset, sometimes just feet or meters or kilometers away from the actual event where the emotions are taking place. But it
Mm.
needs me afterwards to like look at that, some good editing as well. But that gets tears in my eyes. And that's not, I'm not just saying that to like paint a picture. It's literally what's happening in that moment. Of like I see that, it's like, fuck, man, this is crazy, and that's all worth it. And I see the vulnerability of those people, and I see how much they put on themselves, like be at the starting line if we stay with the marathon example.
Mm.
And they just that's all they're focusing on. That's it needs their full focus. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they go home safe and don't even think about it. They expected that. And whatever danger they were close to, or whatever danger the event was close to be like disturbed, they don't need to know it. They have other stuff to do. So and that's it's 100% that. I don't feel those emotions in that moment. I'm feeling something else. I don't feel them afterwards. I don't feel them when I watch the video, but I see them feeling it, and I'm so
Mm.
happy for them. Um, that, and I do my small part to make that happen
I love that. Thank you,
without fail.
Marcel.
Without fail, it doesn't stop.
Thank you. I really enjoyed everything and just really humbled by your experience and everything that you have learned in all your aspects of your career and work to, make this world a safer place and to allow these people to enjoy the joyness that is, participating in these different range of events. So thank you for
Yeah,
your time, Marcel. I really,
no, it
really
was great
appreciate
fun.
it.